class. In this video, we're going to focus on adding and subtracting fractions, specifically in problem solving, which is word problems. But before we go into the lesson, I want you to write down in your notebook your proper heading, including your first and last name, the date, mathematics, and your period number, along with the title, Adding and Subtracting Fractions, Problem Solving Part 1. Let's write that in our notebooks now. Now that we have this, the point of this video is to being able to decipher in a word problem what it is meaning for you to solve and how you can go about solving it. In this video, we're going to show you one way, maybe even two ways, depending on the problem, but don't forget there are multiple ways of solving things. We're just trying to more focus on how to decipher these word problems. So let's begin with our word problem. Whenever we're solving word problems, the first thing that we need to always do is just read the problem. Don't make any assumptions about it. You're just reading the problem to hear what it is saying. And then we'll reread the problem to decipher what it is it's asking us, and then what information that it is that we need when we read it a third time. And then after that, we can complete our plan of how to solve that word problem. So here's the first problem, the first reading. We're just reading it. It says, Martin is making a model of a Native American canoe. He has 13 1/2 feet of wood. He uses 6 3/4 feet for the hull and 5 1/4 feet for the paddle. How much wood does he have left? So reading this, I know we're talking about a boat, but I'm going to read it now a second time to figure it out what it is that we are being asked to do. So I'll read it again. Martin is making a model of a Native American canoe. He has 13 1/2 feet of wood. He uses 6 3/4 feet for the hull and 5 1/4 feet for the paddle. How much wood does he have left? So reading this, and I'm going to underline it, this is my question. I want to know how much wood he has left, okay? That's what I want to know. So after he builds that hull and after he builds the paddle, how much wood he has left? That's my question. So now I'm going to read this a third time, and I'm going to say, all right, I know what I'm being asked. I'm asking how much wood is being left over. So with that, I can then reread the problem and figure out what the important information is. So the third reading, Martin is making a model of a Native American canoe. I read that. Is that really important information? It's not giving us any. So I'm going to leave that sentence alone. I don't need anything from there. Now I read the next sentence. He has 13 1/2 feet of wood. Is that important information? Yes. So I'm going to turn around and I'm going to circle. He has 13 1/2 feet. If this was on paper, I would say highlight it in our multiple highlighters, yellow or light pink, and orange for each different one. But because we don't have that, we're on the computer, I'm just going to circle it. Is there any other important information I need from that sentence? No. So I go on to the next. It says he uses 6 3/4 feet for the hull and 5 1/4 feet for the paddle. We have actually two important informations here, right? We have 6 3/4 feet for the hull, so I'm going to circle that. And then we also have the 5 1/4 feet for a paddle. And note how I use different colors for my important information to my question, right? And that's important because I want to make sure that I separate that two pieces of information, because they're both very crucial, because we're going to have to go back to this black line later, because I use black at this point, to make sure that we have that right answer. So now that I have this information, I could then associate, well, I have 13 1/2 feet. So basically, to drawing that diagram, here's my pile of wood. That's my pile of wood. And I take out, so I'm going to draw a piece. I take out a piece for the hull. And then I also take out a piece for the paddle, right? And then I want to know what is left over. So when I look at this, I'm saying, I'm taking this away. So if I add the hull and I add the paddle, I know what it is that I have, right? Left over if I did the calculations. So I want you to pause this video right now and I want you to write the question and write this work so far in your notebooks. Pause your video right now to do this. Now that I have this in our notebooks, we can then start the calculation. We know he starts off with 13.5 feet of wood. That's our total. That's our grand finale. So I'm going to look at that and I'm going to go, all right, so that's my total. So I know my total goes on one side, right? One side of our equation. Now on the other side, he uses for the hull, he uses for the paddle, and then he has the leftover. That's what makes this number up. So I can turn around and now add them. So I could do 6 3/4 plus the 5 1/4. Plus I can use my variable to signify what is left over. So I need to solve for this x. So let's go back to this and say, all right, this stays the same. And I could add these two fractions because they both have the same denominator. So I have 13.5. We didn't change that. Equals, well, we add the fractions first. 1/4 plus 3/4 gives me 4/4. And 5 plus 6 gives me 11. After I add this, I notice I have 4/4. 4/4 equals another 1. So this 11 4/4 can become a grand total of 12, right? Because 11 plus 1 is 12. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to rewrite that. And when I have this here, I look and I say, all right, how do I get this number? So I could do two things. I could either do guess and check, 12 plus what number is going to give me 13.5. Or I could do the inverse operation. With the inverse of addition is subtraction. So I can subtract these two numbers. So I have 13.5 minus 12. 1/2 minus 0 is 1/2. And 13 minus 12 is 1. So I have 1 1/2 feet left over. There is another way that we can solve this, right? Oh, and before I move on, I just double check, make sure that is what I was asked, and that was how much is left over. So I answered that correctly. Another way, though, that is the same process in a sense, but it's rewritten in a different way. Some people may turn around and say, you know what, I have this, and then I have to subtract this and this, right? So I could do the 13.5, and I'm going to subtract what I took out. What did I take out? This is where I add my parentheses. Well, I took out 6 3/4 for the hull and 5 1/4 feet for the paddle. So I would add them together in the parentheses to do that first, right? And again, this is the same adding as we did before. We don't change the 13.5, so we keep them the same. And I could draw out the parentheses once I add. So we have 3/4 plus 1/4 gives us 4/4. And 6 plus 5 gives us 11. And again, 11 4/4 equals 12. So I have 13.5 minus 12, which we've already figured out was 1 1/2 feet. So we have 1 1/2 feet complete. I'm circling that because that's my final answer. Now I know in word problems we want to put it in a sentence, but I just wanted to save time. So don't forget to make sure you put your answer in a sentence. Pause this video and copy the rest of the work down in your notebooks. Now that we have this down, I want you to do two problems. It's the same exact way that we did this problem, so you can always come back to this. So here's the problem. You have Martin is making a model of Native American canoes. He has 5 1/2 feet of wood. He uses 2 3/4 feet for the hole and 1 1/4 foot for the paddle. How much wood does he have left? And the same problem for number 2, except he has 15 1/2 feet of wood and he uses 2 1/5 for the hole and 3 7/10 for the paddle. How much does he have left over? Don't forget to write the question, show all of your work, and state your answer in a sentence for each one of them in your notebooks. And again, you can also go back to the question that we did to help you if you needed further guidance.